You can have your
Main event of the evening.
ready to race to you.
These days are Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today, we are discussing episode 3 of the Fonz and the Happy Days gang, Arabian Knights. And that's Knights with a K.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Arabian Knights with a K.
The time machine is in a tight spot.
Damn, we're in a tight spot.
Cupcake realizes that they're stuck between times because the transmission conked out. Fortunately, Fonzie is there, and he knows his way with a screwdriver and a transmission.
Fonz, fix this thing and take us home, please!
Stand over there, Ralph.
With a couple of adjustments, he gets the machine unstuck. Well, that work made him thirsty, so Mr. Cool goes to get him some water, and accidentally wastes the ship's entire water supply. Without it, the ship will overheat, so Cupcake has no choice but to land immediately. Surely they'll land near a lake or a sea or a river, right? Nope.
Chuck Testa.
It's the middle of the Arabian desert, next to a pretty lady who asks if they're genies.
I am Princess Charisma.
Yeah, and I'm Martha Fonzarelli at your service.
She's Princess Charisma, and her evil uncle Abdul the Cruel has taken over her kingdom. She even promises to supply all the water they need once they help defeat her uncle and his genie. Ralph is skittish at the mention of a genie.
On second thought, maybe we can take care of the water ourselves.
Mr. Cool attempts to find the necessary water using a dowsing rod, but the oasis he finds is only a mirage. Cupcake tries to hide the time machine with her future human magic powers, but ends up covering the gang in sand.
Cupcake! The next time you want to help, keep your hands in your pockets.
When they reach Charisma's kingdom, it's behind a wall. Cupcake tries to summon a ladder, but only gets a rope. Still, Fonzie is able to lasso it over the wall and climb up, followed by Mr. Cool and the gang.
That's cool in the gang.
Evil Uncle Abdul is watching through his crystal ball, and through his genie, appears before the gang with 2 guards.
You may all arrive here faster than you think, but in my dungeon.
Ralph tries to run away, but the genie catches him in a net. Richie is about to get his ass kicked by the guards, but Fonzie comes to his rescue by dumping a cart full of oranges that the guards all trip over. Abdul orders the genie to capture the gang while he gets his niece. As Richie and Charisma run up a staircase of flying carpets, the genie summons a gag and rope for Fonzie. Cupcake tries to zap up a solution, and sends the gang into the dungeon.
Very good, Cupcake. Very, very good. You got us out of one mess and right into another.
Abdul plans to keep them there until Charisma tells him where the treasure is, and the walls begin closing in on the gang.
I know the tin is in, Fonz, but this is ridiculous.
Fortunately, Fonzie gets the gate to open with a snap of his fingers, allowing them all to escape before they get crushed. Cupcake's infallible intuition leads her, Richie, and Ralph towards a dead end. But Fonzie's, his pretty lady detection leads him to where Abdul is threatening Charisma.
Lead me to your father's secret treasure cave, princess, or your friends will become permanent guests in my dungeon.
Don't worry yourself there, your beautifulness.
He takes down the guards, and Mr. Cool trips Abdul and grabs his genie's lamp. Then he stumbles into a whole pile of lamps, as he rapidly rubs each one, trying to find the right one. Charisma tells him to stop. No matter who rubs the lamp, the genie is evil. Unfortunately, Mr. Cool just freed that genie.
Now I have you.
Run, Fonzie!
Fonzie, Charisma, and Mr. Cool run, but the genie corners them on the balcony. Fonzie whistles over a flying carpet, and the trio make their getaway. Back with our other trio, Richie, Ralph, and Cupcake find a way out, but Richie protests that it's the harem, and men can't go in there. Ralph would very much like to see all the beautiful women he expects to be in there, and Cupcake says they don't have a choice, so they fit in better. Cupcake zaps them into harem outfits.
Oh, Cupcake, now this is pathetic.
The guys back home find out about this, I'll be laughed out of Milwaukee.
Once they're outside, more guards come across them. Ralph flirts with one.
Be careful out here tonight. Some prisoners have escaped.
I hear they're dangerous, desperate men.
Until the disguise wears off. Fortunately, they get rescued by Fonzie, Charisma, and Mr. Cool on the carpet. The genie gives chase and snatches Charisma, then covers the sky in clouds and puts a brick wall right in their carpet's path.
They will all be hurt.
Or worse, princess, unless you tell me where the treasure is hidden.
With her friends' lives at stake, Abdul bargains with Charisma for the location of the treasure. Cupcake tries to zap away the clouds, but just makes it rain. Mr. Cool takes over piloting the carpet, so Fonzie can look for the princess.
Are you sure you can handle this?
And thanks to his terrible flying, they crash through a tent, nearly hit a camel, and sail through a grove of trees. Charisma tells her uncle that the treasure is in the Haboob Highlands. Being a villain, Abdul does not do anything to save the gang.
You should know better than to trust me, princess.
And they crash right through the brick wall. Mr. Cool falls off the carpet, and Cupcake saves him by giving him an umbrella for a parachute. It doesn't last long, but the carpet catches him. They follow Abdul and Charisma into the cave where the treasure is.
At last, the treasure is mine.
Hey, Hey, maybe you better think that one over again, Abby.
Abdul summons his genie to take care of them, and the gang stand their ground, except Ralph, who hides behind a gong. Cupcake faces off against the genie, but her magic goes right through him. It bounces off Ralph's shield, and he hands off the vibrating gong to Abdul, causing him to stumble backwards into a chest that shuts on him. Fonzie sucks the genie through a funnel back into his lamp, and Richie stuffs the cork in.
Hey, like I always say, teamwork always pays off.
Charisma makes good on her promise to give the gang all the water they need, while Mr. Cool, Richie, and Ralph continue to play in the mirage.
Thank you, Peter. That was Arabian Nights. It first aired back on November 22nd, 1980. It was followed by a new episode of the Richie Rich Scooby-Doo Show. Segments include
Mummies of the Word, Silence is Golden, Hang in There, Scooby, The Shocking Lady Strikes Again, Stuntman Scooby, and Spring Cleaning.
CBS continued to air the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner Show, and NBC premiered the Flintstone Comedy Show. A brand new series for the familiar franchise. In this episode, the Flintstones and Rubbles purchase a camper together and go on vacation. So, Peter, what are you watching?
Calling it the Flintstone Comedy Show is very strange to me, because aren't all the Flintstones shows comedy? Why are you singling out this one as comedy specifically?
It's giving me memories of the Simpson Family Smile Time Variety Hour. The Flintstones are another family that doesn't know the meaning of the word canceled. I might give it a shot for a week.
I'm curious about the camper because I want to know how they'll make that vaguely Stone Age.
It would be rough powering one of those just by foot power. Arabian Nights was directed by George Gordon, Carl Urbano, and Rudy Zamora. It was written by Barry Blitzer, Ray Parker, Dwayne Poole, and Tom Swale. As for cultural and historical references in this episode takes its title from Arabian Nights, aka 1001 Nights, a collection of Middle Eastern folk tales from the Islamic Golden Age between the 8th and 13th centuries. Some of the most famous stories in this collection were only added to a later French edition, including Aladdin and Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves.
For a class I'm doing, I'm actually researching the story of Aladdin, and you're right that it and Ali Baba and some of the other stories were only added to Antoine Galland's French translation, but he heard those stories from a Syrian storyteller, Hannah Diab, who was in Paris after having assisted another Frenchman, Paul Lucas, during an antiquities expedition, and he told Antoine Galland a bunch of stories when Galland's manuscript that he was translating turned out to only have about 800 or so stories and not the promised 1001 ones. Galland repaid him by not publicly crediting him anywhere, and also making sure that Diab did not get a job at the Royal Library because he was afraid that Diab would replace him.
So much intrigue behind the story of Aladdin. Why didn't these stories make the cut originally?
Some have speculated that the stories were written/made up by Diab himself. Some have speculated that if they are based on earlier folktales, they might have taken some inspiration from European folktales, because Hannah Diab was from Aleppo. That was a very cosmopolitan city at the time, so he might have heard other stories and been influenced by them. Who knows? The next time someone claims that some French guy made up Aladdin and therefore it is purely an Orientalist construct, let them know that even if Aladdin and many other stories have been used to Orientalist ends, it itself is not inherently Orientalist.
Speaking of that, Hanna-Barbera already did a cartoon called Arabian Nights with a K in 1968.
At last we meet, Tolhan.
Greetings, fat tyrant.
Finish him!
It was a segment on the Banana Splits Adventure Hour. This episode bears a strong resemblance to that series, which revolved around a deposed prince rather than a deposed princess. It also bears a resemblance to Hanna-Barbera's 1967 cartoon Shazam, which was about a genie. Both Arabian Nights and Shazam draw heavily on 1001 Nights for inspiration. Peter, were you familiar with these earlier Hanna-Barbera cartoons, Arabian Nights and Shazam?
I was familiar with Shazam, but not with Arabian Nights.
I wasn't either until I started researching this episode. Shazam I knew because they did a very elaborate parody of it on Saturday Night Live.
Ho, you're fertilizer now.
What was interesting about that parody is one of the traps in that episode is a dungeon where the walls are closing in, which is almost exactly like what's in this episode. Fonzie says the screwdriver is mightier than the machine.
Screwdriver is mightier than the machine.
This is a variation on the old saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. This famous phrase can be traced back to British author Edward Bulwer Lytton. It's from an 1839 play that he wrote about Cardinal Richelieu. Cupcake says the earth is covered with water.
The earth's covered with water.
She is right. Water covers 71% of the Earth's surface, but I would have to figure that most of that would be salt water, and I don't know if salt water would help them in this situation or not.
It's a future time machine, so maybe it can convert salt water to fresh water or something. I don't know. If they can give human beings magic powers, they can do that, I'm sure.
Richie says they've landed in the Arabian desert.
For one thing, you could land in the middle of a desert.
The Arabian desert.
That means that this story probably takes place in what is now Saudi Arabia, though this desert, the 5th largest in the world, stretches into Egypt, Iraq, and Jordan. Princess Charisma asks if Fonzie and his friends are genies.
Are you genies?
The word genie is an anglicized version of the word jinn, which comes to us from Arabian mythology and refers to intelligent spirits that can appear in human or animal forms and can possess humans, despite what the princess says later.
The genie is evil, no matter who rubs the lamp.
Jinn are neither inherently good nor inherently evil, and they generally do not meddle in human affairs.
Genies are not inherently good or evil, but I think in this episode it's just supposed to be that this genie specifically is an asshole, which is very funny to me because I think that most genies in mainstream American pop culture are happy to help. This one is not. He's just a dick.
For the record, the word charisma comes to us from Greek, not Arabic. And I have to ask, are people still saying Riz in 2024?
I don't think they are. Slang can have a very short shelf life. Like, I remember back in 2013, everyone on Tumblr was saying the feels, and then 2014 happened and nobody was saying it anymore. Thank God.
Mr. Cool uses a wooden dowsing rod to look for water.
Forget the dowsing rod, Cool.
Though this practice dates back to ancient times, it was banned by the Catholic Church as blasphemous, and Martin Luther agreed with the ban as well. Some continue the practice today, though it has no scientific merit. I was totally unfamiliar with dowsing until I saw the Mystery Science Theater 3000 episode, The Thing That Couldn't Die.
That vein of water must still be here in the ground.
She'll find it if it's here. Yeah, she'll find it.
Have you seen that episode, by the way?
Yes, I have.
Was that your introduction to dowsing, or were you familiar with dowsing beforehand?
I learned about it from the movie Coraline, where Coraline finds a dowsing rod and tries to use it, and it takes her to the empty well.
Hello? Who's there?
Uncle Abdul uses a magic lamp to summon a genie. This comes to us from the aforementioned Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp, which in fact has two different genies, one from a ring, the other from a lamp. I was trying to understand the genie hierarchy and the genie rules, like why a ring genie is not as powerful as a lamp genie.
I don't know enough about genies to speculate as to why that is, but I guess it makes sense that some genies are more powerful than others.
At the bazaar, there are flying carpets.
Hey, it's like a flying magic carpet here. Look at this. I'm flying around in Egypt land.
Cute.
Magical or flying carpets appear in 1001 Nights, but not in the story of Aladdin. Instead, they appear in the story of Prince Hussein. According to the book,
whoever sitteth on this carpet and willeth in thought to be taken up and set down upon other sight will, in the twinkling of an eye, be borne thither, be that place near or distant, many a day's journey and difficult to reach.
No wonder the story takes 1001 nights to tell. My God. Richie says he's looking for the nearest American embassy.
Come on, Princess. Let's look for the nearest American embassy.
There would not be a U.S. embassy in Saudi Arabia until the 1940s, well after the time of this story, though that may be the joke here.
I do believe that is the joke.
The current embassy is in Riyadh. The idea of the treasure cave comes from Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves.
Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves.
Where the titular thieves have hidden their treasure in a cave.
Something that I find very funny about Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves is that even though he's the titular character, Ali Baba is pretty useless, and the real hero of the story is Marjana the servant girl, who actually saves her employers' lives over and over and over again.
Fonzie says, where there's a Fonzarelli, there's a way.
When there's a Fonzarelli, there's a way.
The phrase, where there's a will, there's a way, originated with the 17th century Welsh poet George Herbert. We talked more about this phrase in our review of There's No Business Like No Business. Richie finds a door in the palace, but says he can't go in there because it's the harem.
We can't go in there. That's the harem.
This is simply a domestic living space for the female members of a Muslim household. The highly sexualized version of the harem is a Western creation.
Harem? All those beautiful women?
Harems are much less common today, of course, but they were once considered sacred, inviolable spaces. Did you think that they were going to depict the inside of the harem in this episode? They don't.
I suspect they didn't, because then they would have had to have more character models, and they were not going to do that.
When Fonzie yells, air raid, It reminds us that air raid drills were still part of American life in the 1950s. How late do you think they were still doing those duck and cover drills?
I have no idea. I was born in 1997, so I don't know. But I am used to active shooter drills.
What were those drills like? Did you hide under the desk, or what did you do?
There was hiding under the desks. I don't know if I really learned any useful skills, but I think that I am roughly about as traumatized from them as a child who grew up during air raids and nuclear bombing drills would be.
They taught us a siren means disaster, then they had the foresight to blow a siren every day at 12 o'clock.
The genie uses a crystal ball to spy on our heroes.
But I got a crystal ball!
These actually go back to ancient Rome, not Arabia.
I guess it's just the general idea of, the Middle East is a mystical, magical place, so they must have crystal balls.
The princess says that the treasure cave is in the Habub Highlands.
It is in a hidden cave in the Habub Highlands.
There is no such place, but a haboob is a dust storm. And the phrase used to open the treasure cave is open sesame.
Open sesame.
Which comes from Alibaba and the 40 Thieves.
Alibaba and the 40 Thieves.
Fonzie's variation, Open Says Me,
Open says me.
comes from a 1937 Popeye cartoon. Other observations this week, I don't think anyone actually says it, but Cupcake is initially jealous of Princess Charisma. Her mood noticeably sours when the princess arrives.
We've got to find water.
Is Cupcake kind of possessive and jealous about Fonzie?
She definitely is. I do kind of feel for her because he does not reciprocate at all, which I guess makes kind of sense given that she is the reason that they are leaping from time to time, hoping that each one will be the last leap home.
Just as Fonzie said correctamundo last week, Richie says bucko this week.
Hey, bucko! You can't capture the princess.
He also does his sarcastic ha 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 laugh. So I'm glad to hear all the old Happy Days catchphrases coming back, but we haven't heard the big one, Peter.
Maybe Sit On It is too edgy for a cartoon.
It's too much for Saturday morning. You can say that kind of filth on Tuesday nights, but not on Saturday morning. This episode has a surprisingly funny Mr. Cool scene where he opens a cabinet full of oil lamps and frantically rubs them all in hopes of finding one with a genie. I don't know why I found that scene so funny. It's just that it's how I would react if that happened to me. Like, I would just panic, and you see the look of panic on Cool's face as he's rubbing all these lamps.
Then right as he's told not to bother, he finds the right one.
He has a rough week this week. Fonzie says, all right, you hot rod hall runner, let's motivate.
All right, you hot rod hall runner, let's motivate.
It took me a few seconds to realize that he was talking about the flying carpet. I didn't know what he was talking about. A hot rod hall runner? What the hell is that?
Yeah, that was a little bit arcane, I think.
And if Cupcake is from the 25th century, that means the human race is going to evolve wildly in the next 400 years. I guess we're all going to have rainbow powers?
I guess. So Cupcake explicitly refers to her powers as magic in this episode. That just raises more questions.
Maybe Cupcake is not a typical person from the 25th century. Maybe she's a magic person from the 25th century?
Or it's like that one Simpsons joke from a Flash Forward episode where Marge takes a picture and it instantly becomes a cake. And she says,
"We can do anything now that scientists have invented magic."
Oh, that'll be great. That'll be really convenient. Speaking of Cupcake, here are some of the things that she says in this episode. Cosmic calamities. She says that 3 times. Leapin' light years. Neptune's moons. Moon craters. She also says that 3 times. Creepin' Kronos. She's referring to the Greek god of time. Galloping galaxies. Leaping laser beams. And shooting stars. She goes overboard on the catchphrases this week. Peter, any favorites out of that list?
Leapin' Light Years is very fun. It's Very Little Orphan Annie.
I also like Leaping Laser Beams because it reminded me of the movie Laser Blast. I'm also still keeping track of the times Mr. Cool makes things better and the times that Mr. Cool makes things worse. Here are the times that Mr. Cool makes things better in the episode. He somehow manages to raise the portcullis as Richie, Ralph, and Cupcake are escaping the dungeon, and he accidentally lands on Abdul, knocking him unconscious. But here are the times that Mr. Cool makes things worse. He spills the gang's entire water supply on the floor of the time machine. He leads Richie and Ralph to an oasis that turns out to be a mirage. He unleashes an evil genie, and when he takes over piloting the flying carpet, he does a terrible job of it. I mean, he's a dog, but still...
I don't blame you. You're a dog! A dog!
I can't say that this week was a win for Mr. Cool. So, Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in Arabian Nights?
I think the most memorable ones are the harem outfits that Cupcake puts herself, Richie, and Ralph in for like a minute total. You, the listener, probably have an idea of a default sexy harem girl outfit that Orientalism has sort of imprinted on the Western imagination. That is basically what they're all wearing. Cupcake's is pink and yellow, like her regular outfit. Richie's is purple, and Ralph's is green. They are pretty cute in them, I'm not gonna lie.
I noticed that they were able to show their navels in these, which, of course, Barbara Eden on I Dream of Jeannie was not able to do.
So you couldn't show your navel on live-action TV in the 60s, but you can do it on a Saturday morning cartoon in the 80s, and you can't say sit on it on a Saturday morning cartoon in the 80s, but you can say it on a live-action 70s show. That's like the hierarchy here.
The rules are so complicated. Peter, did you have any other observations you wanted to make about Arabian Nights?
I was really uncomfortable with how evil Uncle Abdul was drawn. Most of the people in this episode look normal, and he does not. He has noticeably more exaggerated features than everyone else, and that was kind of gross.
He is drawn as a racist caricature, the type that you definitely would not see in movies or television today. He looked like something that was out of a propaganda poster. That's what he reminded me of. I think they feel like they balanced it out by their depiction of Princess Charisma, who is drawn with normal human features. So, Peter, I will ask that age-old timeless question. Was this episode any good?
Honestly, this was a pretty fun one. It operates at like a baseline level of Orientalism. This is not really an episode that has anything new to say about the Middle East, other than like what they gleaned from the 1001 Nights. And as mentioned, Uncle Abdul is straight up a racist caricature. Even so, this is a moderately fun episode, so there is that.
I felt that this episode was created by people who took a checklist of Arabian cliches and wanted to check off each one. Harem, check. Oasis, check. Flying carpet, check. Genie, check. You know what I mean? The first time I watched it, I wasn't even sure what the goal was. It wasn't a princess rescue story because the princess is out and free and doing stuff for most of it. I was like, wait, what is the goal of this? They're trying to take back the city, or they're trying to find a treasure, or they're trying to save a princess? What's going on here?
Why does Abdul need charisma to find the treasure? Why does he need more treasure? He's already ruler of the kingdom. He has a genie. I don't know exactly what this genie's limitations are, but surely the genie makes up for everything else, right?
I think they just put the treasure cave in because of Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. That story has a treasure cave, so this one has to have a treasure cave. Again, it just feels like they're throwing together a bunch of cliches into a story. It didn't really feel coherent to me. This one just felt frantic and all over the place. So I did not enjoy this one as much as the first two episodes. It goes by fast enough, so it's not painful to watch other than the depiction of Uncle Abdul. But this is one that I would say that people can skip over if they're watching the Fonz and the Happy Days gang. So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things we are doing?
Listeners can follow me on Blue Sky at petervolfront.bsky.social.
And they can follow me on Blue Sky at joeblevins.bsky.social. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com, and they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, we go from the desert to the ocean as the gang takes on pirates in Bye Bye Blackbeard.
I love a good pirate story, so I'm very psyched for this. So, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
You've heard of Ali Baba. 40 thieves had he. Out for what we all want. Lots of LSD. He also had a camel. Stole it from a zoo. How he loved the camel and the camel loved him too.
Oh, how the camel loved Ali Baba.
Ali Baba's camel loved Ali Baba so. No matter where he went to, the camel had to go. Some say that he's in heaven, but this I know is true. Wherever you think Ali's gone, his camel's gone there too.
Oh, Cupcake, now this is pathetic.